Hello! Time to talk about part 3 of The Well of Ascension. This was very interesting and very different than the previous part, where you'll remember I said about the previous part that I didn't really have much to say about the political dimension of the book yet. Well, this time almost all of my thoughts are about the political dimension, because that was very much the focus of this portion of the book. Both the in-universe politics and the implications about perhaps real-world politics that are being made. But before I get to that, I am going to talk about other stuff. I'm going to leave that as like the main chunk of the video, but as a bit of an intro, I'm going to talk about something else, which is the, I guess you could say, magical, mystical, mythic portion of the story to do with the Hero of Ages, which I think... What are my neighbors doing? The whole Hero of Ages thing, I think, is doing something very interesting as a sort of exploration of a chosen one narrative. Pretty much every fantasy story nowadays is some kind of deconstruction or exploration of a chosen one narrative. And I never get tired of it. I do like interrogations of that particular trope when they are done well. And in this case, it's being done in several fairly original ways. First of all, obviously the first book had the big reveal that the Chosen One wasn't who we thought it was. The Lord Ruler had been presenting himself as the Hero of Ages. It turned out he was just some guy who killed the Hero of Ages and usurped his place. Which was already an interesting twist. Now in this book, we're twisting the twist a bit. Because we have the implication and possibly confirmation, it's still not clear yet, from the text that Sazed found in the conventicle of Saran, that the person who was supposed to be the Hero of Ages and who was usurped by Rashek, the person whose name we now know to be Alendi, was also not the Hero of Ages. In fact, he may have been, like, actively a fraud. It's a bit unclear yet if he believed himself to be the Hero of Ages, or if he just really sold himself as such to people. I'm guessing he did believe it based on his diary, which we have from the previous book. But it's implied that he was wrong. We'll see. Maybe Quan is wrong about him being wrong, but I'm very curious to see where that will develop. But more interestingly, Vin herself has noticed similarities between herself and Alendi, and because she is not privy to the new information that Sazed has, she's still convinced that Alendi was the Hero of Ages. And so, because she sees these similarities between him and herself, like the fact that they both hear this dull thumping in the distance, and they both see the mist wraith, the mist phantom that attacks them, she thinks that she might be the Hero of Ages. And it's a really interesting dynamic, because so many stories have the hero being an unwilling chosen one. You have the hero who is told that they are the chosen one, and then they reject that. And it's a long character arc for them to accept their position. But here we have kind of the opposite. We have the heroine of our story herself concluding that she is the chosen one, but then she's like, I can't tell people that. They'll think I'm insane. Like, they'll think I'm an egomaniac. What kind of person would call themselves the Hero of Ages? And she's right. That's a very realistic concern to have. Like, if I suddenly became convinced that I was the second coming of Christ, I don't think I'd tell people. I'd feel real too embarrassed to even say something like that because people would think I was just insane. Um, so I really like that element. I'm curious to see what the ultimate outcome will be. Right now, my gut feeling is that Vin is not the hero of ages. My gut feeling is that one of two things will happen. Either some other character who we do not expect will turn out to be the hero of ages, in which case my guess would probably be Zane, because he hears God, and I'm guessing it's going to turn out that that's not mental illness, that he actually does hear something. So either Zane or no one. That's also a possible outcome here. A possible outcome is that there's no such thing as the hero of ages, because really, we don't have any evidence that there is such a thing as the hero of ages. We just have a bunch of ancient Terrace prophecies, and we don't even have those prophecies. We know that there were some prophecies, but the actual content of them has been lost. So who knows if they had any value to them whatsoever. So those are my predictions for neither of those things will probably happen in this book. I'm guessing that's going to be the climax of the entire trilogy at the end of the third book, so that's a long way away. But I just wanted to put my 2 cents in. Those are my 2 predictions. Either Zane is the hero of ages, or there's no such thing as the hero of ages, and it's all bullshit. If it turns out to be Vin, I will be very surprised and kind of disappointed. The other interesting thing that happens in this section on the mystical front is something Orosur says. Vin and Orosur are talking about the relationship between the Kandra and humans, and Vin asks Orosur if the Kandra dream of one day killing all the humans, and Orosur says no, because humans will wipe themselves out. And then the exact quote is, I actually wrote it down here, "You are of ruin, after all, while the Kandra are of preservation." And ruin and preservation are both capitalized. Now, of course, religion is a big theme in this book, in this series in general, and most religions that we hear are clearly not meant to be taken literally. However, the Kandra are literally creatures of the mists, like born of the mists, which makes me think their religion might be a bit more based in something. So if they are of preservation, that would mean that preservation has to do with the mists. The mists preserve. They do not ruin. So there is something else that is ruin that humans are of. I don't know where that's going, but I feel like that line is important, and it's going to be the crux of the main plot in the third book. Like, something about that line just struck me as, oh, this is an important thing to remember. I could be wrong. It could just be flavor for the Kandra religion, but I don't think it is. Yeah, I other miscellaneous thoughts before I get to the political stuff. Breeze is quickly growing to be one of the most fascinating and interesting characters, and I really, really like him, which is why it's so unfortunate that Sanderson is doing romance subplot with him and an 18-year-old, and it's like the vibe that the book is giving off is, oh, it's okay because she's pursuing him. It's not the age difference itself that's the issue. If both of them were 5 years older and therefore had the same age difference that they do now, but she was just 23 instead of 18, I would be infinitely more comfortable with this subplot. As it is, I am just very uncomfortable every time they interact. Um, which, like, I was already kind of uncomfortable about Vin and Elend, and this is much worse. So, I hope this isn't a pattern for Sanderson. Like, the huge age gaps with a really, really young girl and the grown man. But he's already kind of implied that she was in love with Kelsier, so I'm afraid it might be. Is this a kink, Brandon? Is this just what you're into? I don't like it. Um, but aside from that, I like Breeze, and I also I also really like where Oriser and Vin's relationship is going. I've already talked about that last time, and I'm glad that it's still developing. I don't really have much to say there. And my final miscellaneous non-political thought is Lord Ashweather Set is a very Anglophone name. His name is literally made of words in the English language. His daughter is named Ulrianne, which also sounds like a fairly Anglophone noble name. Why on earth is his son named Njorndin? Njorndin? Neorndin? I don't know what to do with this name. I don't know how to pronounce this name. What is this name, Brandon? I googled it to to check if it was a real name, and it doesn't appear to be. The only results are the MISTBORN character. So I don't know what's up with this name. It sounds completely like linguistically incompatible with every other name we've got so far in this setting, and especially with the other names of his immediate family members. So I don't know what to make of that one. Anyway, let's get to the meat of this section, which is the politics, the politicking around the throne. This entire section is about determining who will ultimately have the throne, and the answer is one that no one expected, which is Lord Penrod, which I was rather I like that twist. I actually especially like the fact that Set got 0 votes. Like, he was the main threat this whole section. Like, Elend was so utterly focused on him, and it was super clear narratively that Set was going to win, and that was going to be like the act 2 upheaval to the plot. But then no, he doesn't get a single vote, which I really liked. Um, the assembly is really interesting. I'm really curious about the assembly, because I feel like Sanderson is doing some interesting political analysis there. So the merchants, especially Phylan and the others, but mostly Phylan since he's the one we get a POV from, um, are clearly analogous to the post-revolutionary middle class in real-world history. After every bourgeois anti-monarchist revolution, the former peasantry kind of gets divided into two new classes: what we call the working class or the proletariat, and the bourgeoisie. Um, And that's what we're seeing here. We are seeing this purely economic class divide within a group that legally has the same rights. It's no longer like the ska nobility divide, where one group is like institutionally treated differently. It's a very direct economic difference, which I really like. And I like that there's already class antagonism between them. I find that really interesting and also really realistic. Because, yeah, that is kind of how it worked in history. Um, and the rising merchant class is immediately trying to make themselves into the new nobles, essentially. Um, So I really like that aspect of the assembly. What I don't like is some of the weird conversations the main characters have around it. I find it like I don't mind the conversations. I don't mind that they're debating the merits of democracy versus absolute monarchy. What I mind is how they're divvied up. I find it really weird that Elend, the born noble, is the only person in the entire crew of literal revolutionaries who believes in any kind of democracy or accountability for the leaders of a society. And it's connected to him having read a lot of political theory, which kind of seems like Brandon is implying that reading a lot of books is what it takes to make a good leader. Um, at least when it's combined with, like, you know, being assertive and stuff, which is what Tyndall taught him. So I don't know what to make of that. That's still like an aspect of the book I'm withholding final judgment on until I finish the book, because that could go anywhere and it keeps changing. Like in the previous section, I thought that the book was siding with Tyndall. I thought that the book was saying that Tyndall is right, that Elend should have abolished the assembly and been an absolutist ruler. Now, I don't think so. Even though it's bitten him in the ass and it's led to the downfall of uh, his administration, I think it's pretty clear that the book thinks Elend has the moral high ground. And I disagree. I agree that Elend is right about, you know, democracy being good and accountability and checks and balances, yada, yada, yada. But the choice he makes at the end here, he is given the option to essentially, with a very small lie that really would not, in my opinion, undermine anything, he is given the option to essentially stay as king. And instead, because he doesn't want to lie to the assembly, he basically gives Penrod the throne. And that's a terrible choice. Like, that's a terrible choice because you're supposed, like, he literally said in a previous chapter that his whole identity as a ruler is that he is the ruler who cares about the people, about the ska. You know Penrod isn't going to treat the ska well. He doesn't agree with your worldview. You've just sacrificed your people on the altar of your own self-righteousness and moral superiority. And that makes you a terrible leader, actually. Um, so yeah, I really don't like the choice Ellen makes at the end here. Now, again, we'll see where the book takes that. We'll see if the book ultimately ends up defending Ellen's choice, in which case I won't really like that. But as of right now, it's difficult to tell. As of right now, I can just say that I personally disagree with Ellen's choice here despite agreeing with him in every previous step of the process where he disagreed with Tyndall and the others. I was always on his side. But here at this final instance, I think he took his idealism too far. But whatever. Another thing that Elland says when he's talking about what kind of leader he is, he's talking about why he wants to rule. And he says that he wants to protect the Ska, but also to make sure the noblemen don't end up on the wrong end of another rebellion. Hey, Elland, maybe if you abolished the nobility, you wouldn't need to worry about that. Just a thought. Maybe there shouldn't be noblemen. Maybe rebellions happen when there is injustice and inequality. And if you eliminate injustice and inequality, you don't have to protect the noblemen from rebellion because there won't be any. Something to think about. And the final thing I want to talk about here is the reveal of Tyndall's backstory and the reveal of the Terrace Mothers. Now, this is a plot point that is going to... Well, your mileage with this plot point may vary. I can very well see some people finding this whole plot point of the Terrace Mothers to be a bit exploitative, a bit, essentially abusing the female bodies for shock value, essentially. I don't think so, because I think it's very realistic. I think it's a very real depiction of a eugenics program, and it doesn't try to cover up the very horrific implications of what a eugenics program seen through to its final form actually looks like. And it also provides an interesting parallel between Tyndall and Sazed, of course, which apparently is building towards a romantic relationship, which I find, interesting. I'm not necessarily opposed to that. But they have this interesting parallel because he is a eunuch and she is a former Terrace mother, which means that they have both been horrifically sexually abused, and their bodies have been the locus, the object of a eugenic biopolitics. And that, if it is explored further, which I don't know if it will, because Sanderson tends to shy away from talking too explicitly about sexual stuff, but if that were explored further, I would be very interested in reading that in sort of an exploration of the dehumanization of these two people in diametrically opposite ways, but with almost identical results, due to the fact that the eugenic biopolitics of the Lord Ruler did not see them as people, it saw them just as bodies and used them as bodies. So yeah, I find that to be a very compelling narrative from a sociological perspective, I guess, and a political science perspective. I think those are all of my major thoughts from this section. I could talk a bit about how I find the whole Vin and Ellen relationship drama a bit tiring, because it feels like it's just rooted in a lack of communication, and that's never a trope I enjoy. But I'm going to wait until I see where it's actually going because nothing has actually happened. Like they haven't had a fight or a breakup or anything. It just feels like they will. We'll see. Anyway, I'm going to get back to it. I have 3 more parts of the book left. Bye.